G'day, I'm Scott Sanders and welcome to the Reach Australia podcast, a podcast that's all about helping you become a healthy, evangelistic, multiplying church. Now I've got Greg again with me in this episode and we're going to be pushing into the third principle, team pastoring or your role as a senior pastor, lead pastor in being responsible for the whole system, but also handing over and giving responsibility to others. We're going to push into a whole bunch of different areas, and I think this is a really important thing to push into. I just want to hear you, Greg, just talk about how do you understand, sort of the key things that you do as a lead pastor?
So, one is I want to take responsibility for what's happening across the entire church. Which doesn't necessarily mean that I do everything, but I'm responsible for this church rather than kind of getting dragged along in its wake. The next thing I want to do is I want to have a team of senior leaders where they're really clear on what their job is and what the outcome that we're looking for, and I help them to do it. And I also want to have those guys working well together. I want them aligned so that they're all pushing in the same direction and all of their different ministries actually work well together instead of tripping over each other.
You've pressed play on another episode, and this is all about team pastoring. So one of the sort of objections or big questions we have as we sort of push into this is, team pastoring. What's different about this to congregational pastoring?
Yeah, so in congregational pastoring, I'll look after 10 a.m. You'll look after 5 p.m. Someone else will look after 7 p.m. And one of them can be really going well, another one's probably middling, the other one's a bit of a basket case, but that's all right. As long as my one's going well,
Yep.
that your one is going out to the farm. Whereas what we're looking at here is the whole of the church and how all of them are working well. So that's one of those big differences.
So the idea of us all also pushing towards that high level outcome, the idea that we're all aligned towards actually seeing everybody in the church making and growing disciples, and so success for me is actually, you're successful too. So we're actually not competing.
Yeah,
we're actually working together towards this overall outcome.
Yeah, that's right. So no matter what the congregation, we're actually pushing people towards those big goals that we've got for every disciple, deep in the word, Godwardly attentive, on mission, serving, being part of a community. It's no good if the people at 10 a.m. are there, but the people at 7 p.m. aren't. We're actually caring about all of the congregations and every individual there. So
a key part of this is actually about allocating out those purposes, about allocating responsibility, handing that over. That's a big thing for a pastor. Now you're coaching a number of pastors as part of the Reach Australia development program.
Yep.
What are you seeing, pastors struggling with most in sort of the handing over of responsibility?
Yep. Two things that we always struggle with is what I like to do and what's hard to do. So I struggle to hand over leading the growth group ministry because I really like it. I struggle to hand over mission because I really like it. But the fact is, there is only so much I can do, and that handing it over is actually going to be better. The second reason people struggle is when I hand it over to someone else, there's going to be an initial drop in quality, and it's going to require me to invest time in training. And so for a lot of guys, I'm just going to keep doing all the things that I like to do, kind of ignore all the things that I don't like to do, because it's just too hard to give it up or to train.
That's really helpful, Greg. I think another objection to this and another sort of question that a lot of guys has is I didn't get into ministry to be a manager, to lead a team. I got into ministry to spend time with people in the Word. I got into ministry because I'm a preacher and I'm all about preaching God's Word.
Yeah.
So team pastoring, what does it look like to be a shepherd? What does it look like to be a pastor in this team pastoring role? What am I giving up, or am I giving up stuff?
Yeah, well, what it looks like always is doing what your sheep need. So I think whenever we say, I didn't get into ministry too, at that point, it's a fairly selfish point of view, isn't it? We got into ministry to look after the sheep. And if the flock is one person or two people, then what those sheep need and what you can give them is lots of personal attention. But if the flock is to be 600 or 700, that's going to really require me to think differently about what they need me to be. And what they need me to be mightn't be the very lovely, personal sharing in their lounge room. You can do that for about 6 people. But you want to shepherd all of the sheep in the flock. I think it always keeps coming back to what do the sheep need rather than what I want to do.
So Lyle Schaller, church growth expert of the 70s, talks about, the need for a pastor to move from being a shepherd to a rancher in order to sort of move past that, that growth barrier of 125, 120 to push past 200, 250. What does it look like to be the rancher?
So the rancher is going to have multiple shepherds. The rancher is looking at not just what does this individual sheep need, but what does the whole flock need? Where are we going to move the flock to next in terms of feeding them? That is, the rancher thinks about multiple levels of shepherds and what are the systems that need to happen for this flock, this whole flock, to be cared for. And it might feel like there is less personal involvement, but there's just as much love because you're making sure that every sheep is loved.
Now, there's a lot of angst out there about moving towards specialisation, so not being that generalist. There's a fear, I think, of losing those key pastoral skills.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that for us?
The thing is, we're all specialists who are pretending to be generalists. So there is no such thing as the omni-gifted person. And the move towards specialists in some ways is just recognising the reality. And the fact is we all operate as specialists anyway. So if you talk to most pastors, there'll be wide swathes of their ministry that they're just ignoring because they either don't like it or they're no good at it. But those things are still important. And so for my mind, the move towards specialisation is a recognition of the reality of how we're wired and how ministry works anyway. So let's do it deliberately. Let's actually identify where people are gifted. Let's identify the areas that we want ministry to happen and plug people into them rather than kind of go, well, I want to do everything and I'm just going to have a crack at it.
Yeah, I think it was really helpful how you said you want to plug people into it, because I think a lot of people, as they think into pastoring with purpose and as they think into the move towards specialisation, kind of in our head, in our frame, we're always thinking, oh, I need to staff someone for that. But actually, you can move towards this before you have a staff team. You actually you can move towards it even as a church plant. So what does it look like if you're a new church or if you're a small church to move towards pastoring with purpose?
Yeah, I think you're finding the person. Well, one, it's knowing what your purpose is, and we've talked about those.
Yep.
Finding the person who is passionate about that, they're going to champion the idea, and then you start to train them to build a team to do it. Now, it might be that the church is small enough that they can do that on a day a week. You don't need to, you wouldn't want to employ someone into it. And because they're not looking after a whole congregation and doing preaching and running Bible studies and those things, they don't necessarily need to be theologically trained yet. They just need to love Jesus, be passionate about that area, and growing in the skill of building a team. So if I was planting a church tomorrow, I'd still have our purposes. I mightn't even be employed, let alone anyone else, but we'd be looking to plug people into all of those. Yeah.
And so that's how you start to build that team. Find persons to plug into purpose areas and work with them to become passionate champions of their teams.
Yeah, and so across our area, our purpose areas, 2 out of the 5 were people who grew up in church, and the reason that the way they got their job is they were passionate in it and they grew up in that ministry, and eventually we thought, well, we should employ them. And so, but that organic thing of growing up was what happened.
Now, I want to push into an area that you see lots in church life, this idea of siloing. What's siloing?
So picture of an image of a silo is it's tall, it's straight, and it's not connected to the bit next to it. And so you've got 2 silos next to each other. One can be full, the other can be empty, but they're not connected and things don't move between them. That's what often happens in churches. It happens in our heart first, because I care about my thing, not about your thing. But it can also happen in churches where an area, a congregation, a type of ministry is going really well, and the one right next to it is dying.
Now, Tony Morgan in his book on sort of ministry silos has sort of 6, areas where you can sort of identify or see, where things aren't going wrong. Let me just briefly sort of push those out. The vision isn't clear. Leadership isn't focused and committed. It's another sort of way you can see that siloing's happening. The staff structure isn't aligned to the vision of the church. There's an internal culture of competition. So really helpful, you sort of said they're sort of sitting alongside each other, and we're not upset that actually one silo's full and the other one's empty. We're actually not getting concerned about that. There's not an intentional communication strategy as well in the team itself to actually encourage that working together. And then finally, you've got systems that just don't encourage moving towards that overall purpose. There's some ways to identify it.
Yeah.
How does team pastoring, or is team pastoring the solution to that then?
Yeah. Yes, in that, team pastoring is recognising that we're after an ecosystem, not a silo. And in an ecosystem, everything flourishes together. And so, for instance, how is it that the deep in the word people are really going to succeed if the community people, the people who are working on building community, are doing a great job? Likewise, the more the deep in the word people do their work well, the more the community is going to grow, which also means that the serving ministry is going to grow as well. All of that's going to help people to be Godwardly attentive, and together as a church, we're going to be on mission. Rather than 5 disconnected silos, all of them work together, all of them succeed and hum together. And when they all know that, in order to do their job well, they're relying on 4 other areas of ministry. What that means is our guys are really passionate about everyone else succeeding, because they know they can't unless everyone else does.
Now, final question. We talk often about poetry and plumbing.
Yeah.
Now, I think most pastors are quite, they're good at, telling the story, casting the vision, motivating, firing people up. They suck at implementation. They're not very good at building the systems and structures. Yeah. My sense is, that's kind of you, Greg. You're great at you're great at telling the story.
Yeah.
So is that you? And what would you say to the pastor who's actually not that great at systems and structures? How do they start to, move towards a structured way of thinking about team pastoring?
Yeah. It is me. By and large, I think I'm wired to care more about the poetry than the plumbing, but I care passionately now about the plumbing because plumbing loves people. Anyone who's ever been in a family knows that you can't just operate with poetry. You can't just operate with goodwill. We've got 4 kids. To get kids out of the house requires military precision. Put that into a church family. It's irresponsible to be a pastor that just says, look, I'm all about vision, I'm all about the culture, but I don't really think into the structures. No, that's our job. The sheep need us to do it. And so I've become as thoughtful as I can be about all the plumbing, about how we structure, where we put people, about measuring outcomes, about making sure that the ecosystem and the scaffolding of it really works, because the sheep need it.
So, Greg, help us sort of land this in God's word. What does the Bible say about team pastoring?
Yeah, it's funny. It's
not in there. You don't look in the concordance and go team pastoring.
Yeah.
It's like mission. Where's mission? Where's team pastoring in the Bible?
Yeah, where's Trinity?
Yeah.
So the phrase team pastoring isn't there, but it's consistent with what the Bible teaches us about the way God gifts his body. So the church is a body with different parts and different gifts. And now as we do leadership, rather than sticking someone at the top and saying, well, your job is actually to have all of the gifts and to be amazing at all of them and cover all of it, what we're saying is, no, you do have particular gifts. You are not everything the church needs, but within your church are people with those gifts. And so your job is to find them, enthuse them, love them, train them, deploy them, and support them. That's 1 Corinthians 12, isn't it? It's really consistent with it in a way that the solo pastor who does everything just isn't consistent with 1 Corinthians 12.
So you're a part of the Reach Australia Development Program. You're one of our coaches. You're also one of our facilitators as well at our leadership intensives. Can you tell us, why are you involved in the Reach Australia Development Program?
The reason I'm involved is the 4 parts of it: the conference, the cohort intensive, the where we go to churches and we do the consult, and the coaching. What they do is help people to get ideas and then implement them. Most people, we go to a conference, you get heaps of ideas, but then you go home and life takes over. The consult and the coaching actually really helps to change the way we do church. I've been here in Newcastle for 22 years. This is the first, Reach Australia is the first thing that I've thought, yes, it's not just going to give people good ideas, it's actually going to change the way they do ministry and change the way churches run in the long term. That's why I've said I'm completely in.
Great. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode, it'd be great if you could share it with your mates. Share it with someone who might need to hear more about team pastoring. Now, this is an area that is a real challenge. It requires, skill development. It requires a change in how you operate. But it's something that we ought to be, doing more and more. We've been given, the body of Christ, and we've been given gifted people, and we actually want to see that functioning well and functioning towards a purpose. I'm Scott Sanders. Chat soon.
We want to reach Australia. We want to see our friends and families, workmates saved in a living relationship with our glorious and great God. This is our urgent passion. But at present we are not seeing much progress made.
We live in a nation of more than 25 million men, women and children, where no religion is now the largest category of belief in Australia, accounting for more than 30% of people.
Meanwhile, Australia's population is growing at a rate of over 400,000 people each year. And 65% of those people are coming from overseas. We're a national mission field of people who need to hear about Jesus.
Yet the average Australian church is small and getting older. And the very real concern is that the number of workers needed for the harvest is dropping off, not only in cities but in rural and regional areas as well.
And the consistent message that we get from pastors and other church leaders is that they feel stressed and ill-equipped for the task. That's why we're launching Reach Australia.
We're a fresh initiative that combines the strengths of a number of like-minded ministries to help church leaders and their teams grow. There's no one of us that can own the vision. It's going to take all of us to come together so that under God we might see healthy, evangelistic, multiplying churches courageously reaching the lost with the gospel.
We long to see our nation won for Jesus Christ through healthy, evangelistically effective churches.
Our mission is to build a growing network of theologically driven, spiritually vibrant, evangelistically urgent and practically skilled church leaders.
We don't pretend to think we have all the answers. We're not offering a one-size-fits-all solution, but we are convinced that we can make some real progress together.
It is the local church, spiritually healthy, outwardly looking, confident and capable, that under God will reach this country. And we want to help you not only grow spiritually as leaders, but strategically mobilise the saints for this great mission. All you have to do to get started is connect. Visit the website reachaustralia.com.au. Reach Australia, vital leaders, growing, thriving churches.